Princess Kirith stood alone on the crystal balcony of her tower room, watching the twin suns set over the gleaming city of Zephyria. The buildings below sparkled like diamonds, their surfaces reflecting the natural light that her people produced from their skin. She touched her own face, feeling the rough scars that marked her as different from every other member of her species. The Zephyrians were known across the galaxy for their beauty. Their skin glowed with soft colors that changed with their emotions, and their faces held perfect symmetry that other species envied. When they were happy, golden light danced across their features. When they felt love, pink and purple hues swirled beneath their skin like living art. When they were angry, deep red flames seemed to burn within them. Kirith H possessed none of these gifts. A rare genetic condition had left her face marked with deep scars from birth, and her skin remained the dull gray color of stone. No matter what emotions filled her heart, her appearance never changed. In a society that valued beauty above all else, she was considered worthless. Her father, Emperor Vexan, paced the marble floors of his throne room 3 levels below. The weight of ruling the Zephyrian Empire pressed heavily on his shoulders, made worse by his daughter's unmarriageable state. Political alliances in their part of the galaxy were sealed through marriage, and every potential suitor who had come to meet Kirith had left in disgust upon seeing her face. The most recent rejection had come just 2 days ago. Prince Turval of the neighboring Christine system had traveled 3 weeks to reach Zephyria, confident that a marriage alliance would benefit both their worlds. The moment he saw Kirith, his skin flashed bright orange with revulsion, and he departed that same evening without even staying for the planned feast. Kira, single quotes, had grown used to such reactions. She spent most of her time in the vast royal library, studying the languages and customs of distant worlds. While other young Zephyrians learned to dance and display their skin's beautiful light patterns, she buried herself in books about alien cultures. She spoke 17 different galactic languages fluently and could navigate the complex political relationships between dozens of star systems. Her intelligence impressed the royal advisors, but in Zephyrian society, a woman's mind meant little compared to her ability to attract a suitable husband. The Emperor's council frequently reminded him that his daughter's condition reflected poorly on the royal bloodline. Some even whispered that her birth had been a curse upon their people. On this particular evening, as Kirith watched the stars appear in the darkening sky, her father received an interesting message in his private chambers. The communication came from a small blue planet called Earth, home to a species that called themselves humans. These humans had recently achieved faster-than-light travel and were seeking to establish diplomatic relationships with other civilizations. Emperor Vexan studied the message with curiosity. The humans requested permission to send a diplomatic mission to Zephyria, hoping to learn about their culture and technology. What intrigued the Emperor most was their reputation for unusual problem-solving abilities and their apparent disregard for conventional thinking. The message came from Captain Jake Morrison, commander of a human diplomatic vessel. Jake had already made contact with several other species, and his reports showed a remarkable ability to find common ground even with very different alien cultures. Unlike most species, humans seem to judge others based on actions rather than appearance. Jake himself was preparing for the mission aboard his ship, the Earth Voyager. He was a tall man with brown hair and kind eyes, known among his crew for his fairness and his willingness to take risks for the right reasons. His communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, had compiled extensive files on Zephyrian culture, though much information remained classified by their government. The human crew found the Zephyrians fascinating. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth's in many areas, particularly in energy manipulation and crystal-based computing systems. What puzzled the humans was the apparent emphasis on physical appearance in Zephyrian society, something that seemed to limit their diplomatic relationships with species who looked different from them. Jake had always believed that every intelligent species had something valuable to offer. His experiences with the Andromedans had taught him that sometimes the most important discoveries came from the most unexpected sources. The mechanical constructors had shown him that consciousness could exist in forms that looked nothing like biological life. He approached each new contact with genuine curiosity rather than predetermined expectations. As the Earth Voyager traveled through hyperspace toward Zephyria, Jake spent his time learning what he could about their language and customs. He practiced the complex tonal patterns that gave Zephyrian speech its musical quality, though his human vocal cords could only approximate the sounds. Back on Zephyria, Emperor Vexon made his decision. He would welcome the human diplomatic mission, though he had no intention of allowing them to meet his daughter. The shame of Kirith's appearance must not become known to other species, especially not to potential new allies. Kirith learned of the coming human visit from her personal servant, Nelara, who had served the royal family for decades. Nelara was one of the few Zephyrians who treated the princess with genuine kindness, seeing past her physical differences to appreciate her sharp mind and gentle heart. The princess felt a spark of excitement at the news. She had read extensively about humans and found their culture intriguing. They seemed to value diversity and individual achievement in ways that her own people did not. She wondered what it would be like to speak with someone who came from such a different world. However, she knew her father would never allow such a meeting. She would remain hidden in her tower while the humans visited, just as she had been concealed from every other diplomatic mission. The thought filled her with familiar sadness, but also with a growing determination to find some way to learn about these fascinating visitors from Earth. The stage was set for an encounter that would challenge everything both species thought they understood about beauty, worth, and the nature of true connection between thinking beings. The Earth Voyager emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system, and Jake Morrison felt his breath catch at the sight before him. The planet Zephyria gleamed like a jewel against the black of space, its surface covered in crystalline cities that reflected light in brilliant patterns. 3 smaller moons orbited the world, each one carved into geometric shapes that serve as orbital stations. Jake stood on the bridge of his ship, alongside Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez and Sergeant Kevin Blake, his chief engineer. Amy was a sharp woman with dark hair who had spent weeks preparing for this moment, learning everything she could about Zephyrian customs and language. Kevin was a practical man who focused on the technical aspects of their mission, particularly interested in the energy systems that powered the alien civilization. The Zephyrian escort ships that guided them to the planet were unlike anything the humans had seen before. They appeared to be grown rather than built, with smooth organic curves that pulsed with inner light. The ships moved through space with a grace that human technology could not match, leaving trails of colored energy in their wake. As they descended through the atmosphere, Jake marveled at the cities below. Towering spires reached toward the sky, connected by bridges of pure crystal that carried streams of light between them. Gardens of alien plants created patterns of color that shifted and changed as they watched. Everything seemed designed to celebrate light and beauty in ways that human architecture had never attempted. The landing ceremony took place in the Grand Plaza, a vast space surrounded by buildings that rose like frozen music into the sky. Thousands of Zephyrians gathered to witness the arrival of the first human diplomatic mission. Jake noticed immediately how beautiful they all were, with their glowing skin and perfect features, creating a crowd that looked like living artwork. Emperor Vexon greeted them with formal ceremony, his skin displaying patterns of gold and blue that Amy had learned indicated respect and cautious welcome. The Emperor was tall even by Zephyrian standards, with silver-white hair that caught the light like metal threads. His robes were woven from materials that seemed to capture and reflect the glow. From his skin, Jake responded with the traditional Zephyrian greeting, bowing at the precise angle that showed respect without suggesting submission. His pronunciation of their musical language was imperfect, but the effort clearly impressed the gathered crowd. Several Zephyrians allowed touches of pleased green to flicker across their features. The formal presentations continued for hours, with Jake meeting dozens of high-ranking officials, military commanders, and cultural leaders. Each Zephyrian he encountered was strikingly beautiful, their skin displaying complex patterns of light that conveyed emotions and social status simultaneously. Jake began to understand why this species had such influence in their region of the galaxy. However, as the day progressed, Jake noticed something odd. In all the briefings he had received about Zephyrian government, Princess Kirath had been mentioned as an important figure in the royal family. Yet she was nowhere to be seen during the welcome ceremonies. When he asked about meeting all members of the royal household, the responses became evasive. Palace Minister Killan, a thin Zephyrian with elaborate patterns of purple and silver, decorating his skin, explained that the princess was currently indisposed with important cultural studies. Ambassador Falera mentioned that royal women traditionally did not participate in initial diplomatic meetings. Each excuse sounded reasonable, but Jake's instincts told him there was more to the story. His curiosity was further aroused during a private dinner with the Emperor. The meal was served in a hall decorated with living crystal formations that grew from the walls like frozen flowers. The food itself was a work of art, with each dish designed to complement the light patterns of those eating it. Jake found the flavors strange but pleasant, though he had to be careful not to touch anything that might react badly with human biology. During the dinner conversation, Emperor Vexon spoke proudly of his daughter's intelligence and her studies of alien cultures. His skin glowed with warm golden tones when he mentioned her mastery of languages and her understanding of galactic politics. Yet when Jake expressed interest in meeting such an accomplished scholar, the Emperor's skin flickered with brief flashes of distress before returning to neutral patterns. Jake decided to use official diplomatic channels to request a formal audience with the princess. His reasoning was simple and proper. As Earth's representative, he should meet all members of the ruling family to ensure complete diplomatic protocol was followed. The request could not be refused without causing a diplomatic incident. Emperor Vizan found himself trapped by his own customs. To deny the request would insult the human delegation and suggest that his daughter was somehow unfit for diplomatic contact. Yet allowing Jake to see Kirat H would reveal the shameful truth about her appearance. After consulting with his advisors, he found a solution that might satisfy both needs. The meeting would be conducted in the traditional manner, used for certain ceremonial occasions, through the veil of courtesy. This ancient practice involved placing a specially designed screen between participants that allowed voices to pass clearly while obscuring visual details. The Emperor presented this as a mark of special honor, suggesting that it showed great respect for the human delegation. Jake found the custom interesting rather than suspicious. Many of the alien species he had encountered had unusual social protocols, and he was always willing to respect local traditions. Amy helped him prepare for the meeting by reviewing proper forms of address and appropriate topics for discussion with Zephyrian royalty. The audience chamber chosen for the meeting was one of the most beautiful rooms in the palace. Crystal formations grew from every surface, creating a garden of living light that responded to sound and movement. The veil of courtesy was positioned in the center of the room, appearing to be made from the same crystal material, but worked so thin that it seemed like frozen smoke. When Jake entered the chamber and took his position, he could see a shadowy figure on the other side of the veil, but could make out no details of appearance. What he heard, however, immediately captured his complete attention. Princess Kirith spoke in perfect galactic standard, but with an accent and rhythm that made every word sound like music. Her voice carried intelligence and careful thought, with subtle humor threading through her formal greeting. When Jake responded in his still imperfect Zephyrian, she switched smoothly to his language and complimented his pronunciation with genuine warmth. The conversation that followed lasted far longer than either had planned. Jake found himself talking with someone who understood not just the facts of galactic politics, but the deeper currents that drove relationships between species. Kirat Etch demonstrated knowledge of human history that surprised him, referencing events and cultural developments that even his own crew members might not have known. They discussed philosophy, comparing human and Zephyrian approaches to questions of justice and individual rights. They talked about literature, with Kirith quoting from ancient Earth poets that Jake himself admired. They explored the challenges of leadership and the weight of responsibility that came with representing one's people to the galaxy. As their first meeting drew to a close, Jake realized he had spent 3 hours in conversation without once thinking about what the princess looked like. Her mind had engaged his so completely that physical appearance seemed irrelevant. He found himself requesting additional meetings, claiming a need to better understand Zephyrian culture for his diplomatic report. Kirat H agreed eagerly, though she felt a growing anxiety about the deception. She had never experienced such intellectual connection with anyone, and the knowledge that it was built on concealment of her true nature filled her with both joy and dread. Over the following days, Jake found excuses to meet with Princess Kirith every afternoon. Each conversation through the veil of courtesy revealed new depths to her character and intelligence. She possessed a sharp wit that could make him laugh, even during discussions of serious political matters, and her insights into alien psychology helped him understand cultural dynamics he had never considered. During their third meeting, Kirith shared her passion for ancient poetry. She recited verses from the classical Zephyrian masters, translating the complex metaphors into concepts that Jake could appreciate. The poems spoke of light and darkness, of beauty found in unexpected places, and of the courage required to love despite fear of rejection. Jake reciprocated by sharing human literature, telling her about poets like Robert Frost and Maya Angelou, who had written about finding strength in adversity. He found himself opening up about his own experiences, describing the loneliness of command and the weight of representing his entire species. In diplomatic encounters, that Kira single quotes listened with genuine interest as Jake described Earth's diverse cultures and landscapes. She asked detailed questions about human customs, particularly intrigued by the concept of marriage based on personal choice rather than political arrangement. The idea that humans could choose their partners based on compatibility and affection seemed almost magical to someone who had grown up expecting her marriage to be a diplomatic transaction. Jake began to look forward to these meetings more than any other part of his diplomatic mission. While the formal negotiations with Emperor Vexon and his ministers proceeded smoothly, it was his conversations with Kirith that truly excited him. She challenged his assumptions about leadership and helped him see familiar problems from entirely new perspectives. The princess found herself experiencing emotions she had never felt before. For the first time in her life, someone valued her thoughts and opinions without any consideration of her appearance. Jake treated her as an intellectual, equal, seeking her advice on complex matters and genuinely respecting her knowledge. She began to understand what it might feel like to be appreciated for who she truly was rather than rejected for how she looked. Their discussions grew more personal as the days passed. Jake talked about his childhood on Earth, describing the small farming community where he had grown up and the dreams that had led him to join the diplomatic service. He spoke of his hope that humanity could find its place among the galactic community without losing the qualities that made them unique. Kireth shared her own dreams of seeing other worlds and learning about different species firsthand. She described the loneliness of her position, though she was careful not to reveal the true reason for her isolation. She spoke of her love for learning and her frustration with the limitations placed on her by royal protocol. Jake began to realize that his feelings for the princess were growing beyond professional respect or even friendship. Her intelligence fascinated him, her humor delighted him, and her gentle nature made him want to protect her from whatever was causing the sadness he sometimes heard in her voice. He found himself thinking about her during other meetings and looking forward to their afternoon conversations with an anticipation that had nothing to do with diplomacy. Amy Rodriguez noticed the change in her captain's behavior and felt concern about the implications. As his communications officer, she understood better than anyone how dangerous personal attachments could be during diplomatic missions. She tried to discuss her worries with Jake, but he brushed off her concerns, insisting that his relationship with the princess remained purely professional. Kevin Blake was more direct in his observations. During their evening briefings, he pointed out that Jake seemed distracted during important technical discussions, but became animated whenever the princess was mentioned. The engineer worried that his captain was developing romantic feelings for someone he had never actually seen, which seemed like a recipe for disappointment, or worse, despite his crew's concerns. Jake could not deny his growing attraction to Kireth. During their fifth meeting, he found himself studying the shadowy outline of her figure through the veil, wishing he could see her expressions and read the emotions that her voice sometimes concealed. He began to consider the possibility of pursuing a more personal relationship. Kireth was experiencing her own internal struggle. Jake's obvious interest both thrilled and terrified her. She had dreamed of finding someone who could love her for herself, but she knew that dream was built on deception. Every word of affection he spoke was based on an incomplete understanding of who she really was. The weight of the secret grew heavier each day. When Jake complimented her wisdom, she wondered if he would still respect her intelligence if he could see her scarred face. When he praised her insights, she questioned whether his admiration would survive the shock of her true appearance. She found herself caught between the joy of being appreciated and the fear of inevitable rejection. Emperor Vexon observed the developing relationship with a mixture of hope and anxiety. His spies reported that Captain Morrison seemed genuinely interested in his daughter, which could solve the problem of her unmarriageable status. However, the Emperor also knew that human reactions to physical differences were unknown. What if Jake responded with the same revulsion that every other suitor had shown? The crisis came during their seventh meeting, when Jake directly expressed his romantic interest. His words were carefully chosen and respectful, but his meaning was clear. He spoke of feeling a connection unlike any he had experienced before, and he asked for permission to court her properly, according to both human and Zephyrian customs. Kireth felt her heart racing as she listened to his declaration. Everything she had ever wanted was being offered to her, but she knew it was built on a foundation that could crumble the moment he learned the truth. She asked for time to consider his proposal, knowing that she faced an impossible choice. That night, Kireth stood again on her crystal balcony, watching the stars and wrestling with her decision. She could continue the deception and possibly win Jake's love based on a lie, or she could reveal the truth and almost certainly lose the only person who had ever valued her for herself. Jake spent the same night walking the corridors of his ship, thinking about the strange situation he found himself in. He was falling in love with someone he had never seen, someone whose culture and biology were completely different from his own. Yet the connection he felt was stronger than anything he had experienced with human women who shared his species. And background. Amy found him in the observation lounge, staring out at the glowing planet below. She sat beside him without speaking, understanding that her captain was facing a decision that would affect not just his personal happiness, but potentially the entire diplomatic mission. The next morning brought a message from Princess Kirith, requesting a meeting that evening. Jake agreed immediately, unaware that the princess had made her decision. She would tell him the truth about her appearance and accept whatever consequences followed. She could no longer build a relationship on deception, even if honesty meant losing everything she had come to hope for. Princess Kirith chose the Palace Garden of Memories for their meeting, a quiet place where crystal trees grew in patterns that honored fallen Zephyrian heroes. The garden was designed for reflection and truth-telling, with paths that led visitors through moments of beauty and sorrow. She hoped that if Jake was going to reject her, at least it would happen in a place that held meaning for her people. She arrived early, wearing simple robes instead of her usual formal attire. Her hands shook as she dismissed her guards and servants, insisting that she needed complete privacy for what was to come. The twin suns were setting, casting long shadows between the crystal formations and creating pools of colored light on the ground. Jake approached the garden with anticipation, expecting another conversation through the ceremonial veil. Instead, he found Kirith standing beside a fountain of liquid light, her back turned to him as she gazed at the memorial crystals. For the first time since arriving on Zephyria, he could see her clearly without any barrier between them. Even from behind, he could tell that something was different about her appearance. Her skin did not glow with the soft radiance that characterized her people, and her posture suggested someone who had learned to make herself small and unnoticeable. When she turned to face him, Jake saw immediately why she had been hidden from view. Kirith's face bore deep scars that ran from her temples to her jaw, marking her skin with lines that told stories of pain endured since birth. Her eyes, which Jake had never seen before, were the same golden color as other Zephyrians, but they held a sadness that spoke of years of rejection and disappointment. Her skin remained the dull gray of stone, showing none of the emotional colors that danced across the features of her people. Jake stopped walking and simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Kirith felt her heart breaking as she watched him process what he was seeing. She had prepared herself for this moment, but the reality of watching someone she had come to love discover her true appearance was more painful than she had imagined. The silence stretched between them until Kirith could no longer bear it. Her voice came out smaller than she intended as she spoke. "Now you understand why we met through the veil. Now you see why no one has ever wanted to marry the alien princess." Jake's response surprised her completely. Instead of backing away or showing signs of revulsion, he stepped closer and studied her face with genuine interest. His eyes traced the patterns of her scars, as if he were reading a map of her experiences, and his expression showed curiosity rather than disgust. "I was worried," Jake said quietly, "that you might find me physically inadequate by Zephyrian standards. Human faces don't glow or change colors to show our emotions. We're probably quite plain compared to what you used." T.O. Kirith stared at him in amazement. This was not the reaction she had expected or prepared for. Jake seemed more concerned about her opinion of his appearance than disturbed by her scarred features. She watched as he continued to examine her face, not with the critical judgment she had endured from countless suitors, but with the same careful attention he gave to everything that interested him. "Your scars," Jake said, reaching out slowly to touch her face before stopping himself. "They tell a story. In human culture, we believe that our experiences shape who we become. These marks show that you've survived something difficult and emerged stronger for it." Kirith felt tears forming in her eyes, an emotional response that other Zephyrians would have displayed through shifting skin colors. Jake noticed her tears and interpreted them correctly as signs of deep feeling rather than distress. He asked permission before gently touching her face, his fingers tracing the lines that had marked her as unmarriageable by her people's standards. "And your skin," he continued, "staying the same color means I can see your real expressions. Other Zephyrians communicate through light patterns that change constantly, but you have to use your actual facial features. It's more honest somehow, more direct." Jake explained that humans valued authenticity and individual character over conventional beauty. He told her about human cultures, where scars were considered marks of honor, and about the human concept. That true attractiveness came from the combination of physical features with personality and intelligence. He described how human couples often grew more attracted to each other over time as they learned to appreciate unique qualities that others might overlook. What overwhelmed Kirith most was the realization that Jake was not just being kind or diplomatic. He genuinely found her attractive exactly as she was. His eyes showed the same warmth when he looked at her scarred face that they had held when he listened to her voice through the veil. She had spent so many years believing that her appearance made her fundamentally unlovable that she could barely comprehend being desired for her differences rather than in spite of them. However, their moment of connection was interrupted by the arrival of Palace Minister Kellan and several royal guards. The minister's skin flashed with patterns of alarm and disapproval as he saw the princess revealed to the human diplomat. He immediately began apologizing to Jake for the princess's inappropriate display and attempting to escort her back to her chambers. Jake's response surprised everyone present. He stepped protectively in front of Kirith and informed the minister that he was formally requesting permission to court the princess according to both human and Zephyrian diplomatic protocols. His declaration sent shockwaves through the palace. Guard, who had never imagined that any alien species would willingly choose their defective princess. News of Jake's intentions spread quickly through the palace, reaching Emperor Vexen within minutes. The emperor's reaction was complex, mixing hope with terror. A marriage alliance with the humans would solve his daughter's problem and potentially strengthen his empire. But the political implications were enormous. Many of his nobles had always questioned Kirith's fitness to be part of the royal bloodline, and her marriage to an alien would provide ammunition for his enemies. Amy Rodriguez and Kevin Blake learned of their captain's declaration through palace staff and rushed to find him. They arrived at the garden to discover Jake and Kirith sitting together beside the fountain, talking quietly while ignoring the nervous guards who surrounded them at a respectful distance. Amy's first reaction was concern about the diplomatic ramifications, but when she saw the way Jake and Kirith looked at each other, she began to understand that this was not a political strategy, but a genuine romantic connection. Kevin was more direct in his assessment, telling Jake bluntly that he was crazy, but adding that the princess seemed like a remarkable woman who deserved someone who could appreciate her worth. The evening ended with Jake formally requesting a private audience with Emperor Vexan to discuss marriage negotiations. Kiradechi returned to her chambers in a state of emotional confusion, hardly able to believe that someone had not only accepted her appearance, but actually found her beautiful, because of her differences rather than despite them. As Jake prepared for what would likely be the most important diplomatic conversation of his career, he reflected on how his feelings for Kirith had developed. He had fallen in love with her mind and personality first, which meant that her physical appearance could only add to his attraction rather than diminish it. He looked forward to learning every detail of her face and understanding the stories that her scars could tell. The stage was set for a confrontation between two very different concepts of beauty and worth, with the happiness of two people and the future of human Zephyrian relations hanging in the balance. Emperor Vexan paced his private chambers throughout the night, his skin flickering between colors of anxiety and hope as he considered Jake's marriage proposal. The human's declaration had created possibilities he had never dared to imagine. but it also threatened to tear apart the careful political balance he had maintained for decades. The Imperial Council convened at dawn, filling the Crystal Hall with representatives of the most powerful Zephyrian families. Many of them had spent years quietly suggesting that Princess Kirith's condition reflected poorly on the royal bloodline. Now they faced the unprecedented situation of an alien species actually choosing her as a bride. Minister Keelan spoke first, his skin displaying formal patterns of concern as he outlined the potential problems. Allowing the princess to marry outside their species would set a dangerous precedent, he argued. Other alien races might expect similar privileges, and the purity of Zephyrian noble blood could be permanently compromised. Ambassador Felira disagreed, pointing out that the humans had proven themselves to be valuable potential allies. Their technology was primitive, but their problem-solving abilities were remarkable, and their diplomatic approach suggested they could be trusted as long-term partners. A marriage alliance would cement relationships that could benefit the Empire. For generations, the debate continued for hours, with council members arguing about precedent, bloodline purity, and political implications. Throughout the discussion, no one questioned whether Princess Kirith actually wanted to marry the human captain. Her preferences were considered irrelevant compared to the broader political consequences. Meanwhile, Jake met with his own crew to discuss the situation. Amy Rodriguez expressed serious concerns about the diplomatic implications of their captain marrying into an alien royal family. The relationship could be seen as an attempt to gain unfair influence over Zephyrian politics, potentially damaging Earth's reputation with other species. Kevin Blake was more supportive, arguing that genuine connections between species leaders could actually strengthen diplomatic relationships. He pointed out that Jake had not sought out this romance for political gain, but had simply fallen in love with someone who happened to be an alien princess. Jake listened to their concerns, but made it clear that his decision was final. He had found someone who understood him in ways that no human woman ever had, someone whose intelligence and character complemented his own perfectly. The fact that she came from a different species seemed irrelevant compared to their emotional and intellectual compatibility. The crisis deepened when news of the proposed marriage reached the broader Zephyrian population. Public opinion was sharply divided between those who saw it as a disgrace to their species and those who appreciated the romantic nature of an alien, choosing love over conventional beauty standards. A group of conservative nobles, led by Duke Veltar, began organizing opposition to the marriage. They argued that allowing such a union would weaken Zephyrian society by suggesting that their traditional values of physical perfection were meaningless. Duke Veltar's skin burned with righteous anger as he declared that the princess's defects should not be inflicted upon the galaxy through alien offspring. However, their opposition faced an unexpected challenge when the proposed marriage became a test of character for everyone involved. Jake's willingness to choose love over appearance resonated with many Zephyrians, who had their own experiences with feeling inadequate by their society's rigid beauty standards. The situation reached a turning point when space pirates began attacking Zephyrian trade routes, threatening the economic stability that underpinned their civilization. The raiders used hit-and-run tactics that frustrated traditional Zephyrian military responses, which relied on overwhelming displays of technological superiority. Emperor Vexon found himself facing a crisis that demanded creative solutions than conventional approaches. In desperation, he turned to both his daughter and the human captain, hoping that their different perspectives might provide insights that his regular advisors had missed. Jake and Kirith worked together to analyze the pirate attacks, combining his knowledge of unconventional warfare with her understanding of regional politics and trade patterns. They discovered that the pirates were using information about Zephyrian patrol schedules that could only have come from someone with access to military. Communications. Their investigation revealed that Duke Veltar had been secretly providing information to the pirates, hoping to create a crisis that would discredit Emperor Vexan's leadership and prevent the royal marriage that he opposed. The Duke's betrayal of his own people for political gain shocked even his supporters. Kyrat H proposed a trap that would use the Duke's treachery against him, while Jake suggested tactics that would allow Zephyrian forces to defeat the pirates, without the massive battles that traditionally resolve such conflicts. Their plan required precise timing and coordination between human and Zephyrian forces, demonstrating the potential benefits of their species working together. The operation succeeded perfectly, with the pirates captured and Duke Veltar exposed as a traitor. More importantly, the collaboration between Jake and Kirith showed the Zephyrian people that their princess's intelligence was a valuable asset rather than a consolation prize for her physical differences. Public opinion shifted dramatically in favor of the marriage as Zephyrians realized that their princess had helped save their economy and expose a traitor within their own noble class. Her scarred face became a symbol of strength and wisdom rather than genetic failure. Emperor Vexan announced his approval of the marriage in a ceremony broadcast throughout the Zephyrian Empire. He spoke of his daughter's contributions to their society and praised Captain Morrison for recognizing her true worth. When others had been blinded by superficial concerns, the wedding ceremony itself became a celebration that bridged the gap between two very different cultures. Jake wore traditional Zephyrian robes that had been modified to accommodate human anatomy, while Kirith's dress incorporated earth, flowers that bloomed in patterns of color that mimicked the light displays her skin could not produce. Jake's vows focused on how Kirith's mind had first captured his heart, and how her physical uniqueness represented everything he loved about her strength and individuality. He spoke of scars as evidence of survival and growth, and of differences as opportunities for learning and appreciation. Kirith's response moved many in the audience to tears as she described how Jake had taught her that true beauty came from being valued for who you really are rather than what others expect you